We have some really bad news coming out of the Supreme Court this afternoon. Bad news for Ohio Republican Jim Jordan. Good news for people who detest the man. Jim Jordan currently serves as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and this Supreme Court ruling, this is the case he desperately wants to disappear, but it won't. Here is the headline. The Supreme Court late this afternoon ruled that former students at Ohio State University can go ahead and sue Ohio State University for failing to protect them from sexual assault that took place inside Ohio State's athletic department back in the 1990s. This is bad news for Congressman Jim Jordan, who, before becoming a United States congressman, was an assistant coach at Ohio State University. He was an assistant coach between 1987 and 1994. Several former wrestlers have come forward accusing now Congressman Jim Jordan of knowing about the sexual abuse taking place at Ohio State University, not only doing nothing to stop it, but having a cavalier attitude about it. The Supreme Court on Monday upheld a lower court's ruling that a lawsuit filed by at least several hundred plaintiffs claiming to have been sexually abused by Dr. Richard Strauss, the physician for Ohio State's athletic department, that case can now go to trial. The Supreme Court has rejected Ohio State University's appeal of the lower court ruling. Lawyers for Ohio State insisted the statute of limitations had run out, but the Supreme Court, seems to be saying that the clock starts ticking back in 2018 when Ohio State University hired a private law firm to investigate the sexual abuse allegations. According to Reuters, in 2019, the private law firm issued a final report concluding that Dr. Richard Strauss sexually assaulted at least 177 male students. The law firm then concluded in their official report that staff members, people who worked over at Ohio State's athletic department, staff members knew of the abuse but failed to do anything about it. That was the finding from the private law firm hired by Ohio State University. The name of that law firm is Perkins Coie. So Ohio State University has already paid out 296 former students. They've already paid 296 former students a grand total of $60 million. But when news of the private law firm's final report was released in 2019, hundreds of other students stepped forward claiming to have been sexually assaulted by Dr. Richard Strauss. You should know that Jim Jordan was an assistant wrestling coach and allegedly shared a locker right next to Dr. Richard Strauss's locker. This could be really bad for Congressman Jim Jordan. Lawyers for the plaintiffs in the new case that went to the Supreme Court accuse Ohio State University of trying to run out the clock, hoping that the statute of limitations would kick in. But now it appears the Supreme Court this afternoon has redefined when the statute of limitations actually kick in. They kick in after this report from the law firm, which was in 2019. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan currently chairs the House Judiciary Committee, as well as the committee looking into the weaponization of our Justice Department. He has been going after Hunter Biden with a vengeance. He is to say, at the very least, a deeply polarizing figure. He has made many enemies, first by serving as Donald Trump's lapdog, twisting and turning the United States criminal code into knots, and basically lying about the laws regarding a president's handling of classified documents. He has gone on countless television shows in the past 2 weeks and has said in the House of Representatives, lied in the House of Representatives that the president doesn't have to turn classified documents over to the National Archives. He has insisted that Trump declassified all these documents, even though Trump is on tape in the indictment saying he didn't declassify these documents. And even worse, when confronted with the indictment, Jim Jordan just flat out lies and says the president can declassify any document he wants just by saying he declassified it. This is a lie. Several executive orders and Supreme Court rulings insist a president can't take classified material home with him and can only declassify documents unilaterally if those documents belong specifically to him, like a diary, an email, or a transcript of a personal phone call. But anything that is government property, like a Pentagon plan for an invasion of Iran, which Trump, according to the indictment, was waving in front of everybody at Bedminster, his golf course, documents, classified documents like that from the Pentagon or the CIA, belong to the United States government, not to a president. And a president cannot declassify those documents without following very strict procedures that require the head of the specific intelligence agency that produced the report to agree to declassify it. Jim Jordan is a liar, an attack dog, and for him, it's all about say whatever you need to win in the court of public opinion. But the court of public opinion is different from the Supreme Court, as well as the trial, now thanks to the Supreme Court, that will be moving forward that could prove very, very damaging to Jim Jordan. As I said earlier, for 20 years, starting in 1978, Dr. Richard Strauss was the official physician for the Ohio State Athletics Department. This is where Jim Jordan eventually became a wrestling coach, and in the locker room shared or had a locker right next to Dr. Richard Strauss's locker. Hundreds and hundreds of former students now claim to have been sexually abused by Dr. Richard Strauss, who ended up committing suicide in 2005. Now, in July of 2018, when that private law firm commissioned by Ohio State University began to look into how Ohio State's athletic department turned a blind eye to the abuse, starting when that investigation began in July of 2018, several former wrestlers at Ohio State University accused Jim Jordan of knowing about the sexual abuse and failing to act, and at times being very cavalier about it. In 2019, a wrestling referee filed a lawsuit against Ohio State University. The referee said that after a wrestling match in 1994, while taking a shower, Dr. Richard Strauss stood next to him and began to pleasure himself. The referee in this lawsuit said he reported the incident to then wrestling coach Jim Jordan, who, according to the referee, said, quote, "Yeah, that's Strauss." This is what the referee told NBC News. The referee said that Jim Jordan, when told about this behavior by Dr. Richard Strauss in the shower, Jim Jordan said, quote, "Yeah, that's Strauss. Yeah, we know," unquote. Like I said, the Dr. Richard Strauss committed suicide in 2005. So this is the reporting that's been done on it. And there are some allegations of possible witness tampering. They say there are reports that possibly Jim Jordan or his brother allegedly coerced several wrestlers to recount their stories. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Let me go back. Hang on for 1 second. This is from the Wall Street Journal. And let me just clean this up here. Here we go. This is from the Wall Street Journal from 2018, just when the law firm was about to conduct its investigation. July 5th, 2018, 5 former wrestlers, including former UFC world champion Mark Coleman, said this week that Representative Jim Jordan was aware of but didn't respond to allegations of sexual misconduct by an Ohio State University team doctor when the lawmaker was an assistant wrestling coach there in the 1990s. This is a quote from Mr. Coleman. There's no way, unless he's got dementia or something, that he's got no recollection of what was going on at Ohio State. Mr. Coleman, the mixed martial arts champion, said of Mr. Jordan in an interview Wednesday. Mr. Coleman and Jordan roomed together on several wrestling trips. Mr. Coleman said, I have nothing but respect for this man. I love this man, but he knew as far as I'm concerned. So that was what Coleman said July of 2018. Here's where the possible allegations of witness tampering come into play. This is August, right? 2018. I'm sorry, 2018 is when Coleman made the claims in an interview with NBC News. Then in August of 2018, this is right when the law firm has been commissioned by Ohio State University to look into further allegations. Mark Coleman, who said, here's the headline from the Daily Mail, former UFC champion Mark Coleman recants claim Congressman Jim Jordan knew about Ohio State doctors' sexual misconduct, as he reveals he was one of 100 alleged victims. So in July of 2008, Mark Coleman says he went to Jim Jordan and said, I was sexually abused by Dr. Richard Strauss. Then in August of 2018, he recants the story. So what happened? Was it witness tampering? Well, according to reporting to NBC News, and I will go full screen here, this was reporting done back in 2019, I believe. Sorry about this. A conservative group that has been defending Representative Jim Jordan released a quote from a former Ohio State University wrestler on Thursday in which he appears to recant his claim that the congressman knew as an assistant coach that the wrestling team doctor was sexually abusing athletes, NBC News reported. Mark Coleman, a former UFC world champion, said in a press release supplied by Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs that his previous comments were not accurate. So, if you want to read the story properly, the guy says he wasn't abused. A conservative group that is busy defending Jim Jordan hired Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs, and they got Mark Coleman to recant what he said, but he was unavailable for comment. At no time did I ever say or have any direct knowledge that Jim Jordan knew of Dr. Richard Strauss's inappropriate behavior, Coleman said in the release. This is a release that was issued by a public affairs company that was hired by the conservative group defending Jim Jordan. What the statement reads, I have nothing but respect for Jim Jordan as I've known him for more than 30 years and know him to be impeccable character. Here's the important piece. Coleman could not be reached to corroborate the comment put forward by the conservative group. NBC News goes on to report, but it stands in contrast to what he told the Wall Street Journal on July 5th, 2 days after NBC News first reported allegations from 3 other wrestlers that Jordan must have known about the alleged abuse by Strauss. One of the wrestlers even said that he talked to Jim Jordan about the doctor's behavior. Okay? UFC fighter claims that he went to Jim Jordan. Then a conservative group hires a public relations firm. They're all in support of Jim Jordan. And a month or 2 later, the UFC fighter is recanting. Here's another example of possible witness tampering. This is from February 12th of USA Today. ex-Ohio State University wrestler. This is the headline. Representative Jordan called crying, groveling, begging to deny sexual abuse claims. The story goes on. It goes on. Let me read you this, and then we have to wrap it up. Here we go. On Tuesday, a former captain of the Ohio State wrestling team told state lawmakers in a public hearing that Representative Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, pleaded with him in 2018 to deny allegations sexual abuse of male wrestlers by a team doctor was well known within the program but was ignored. Quote, Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling, begging me to go against my brother, begging me, crying for a half hour. That's the kind of cover-up that's going on there, unquote. Adam DiSabato told members of the Ohio House Civil Justice Committee about a conversation the congressman and him had on July 24th, 2018. Adam DiSabato, who was a member of the school's wrestling program in the late 80s to early 90s, is the brother of fellow Ohio State University wrestling alumna Michael DiSabato, who helped spur the investigation into the late Dr. Richard Strauss. So this is going to trial. The Supreme Court said that the plaintiffs can move in this trial against Ohio State University. We're going to hear testimony about Jim Jordan and the locker that was next door to Dr. Richard Strauss's locker, and we're going to get to hear from all the wrestlers who claim they complained to then assistant wrestling coach Jim Jordan that Dr. Richard Strauss was molesting them, and according to these reports, Jim Jordan laughed it off. And according to this testimony that was before the Ohio, the Ohio House Civil Justice Committee, there are possibilities of witness tampering. This is what the reporting seems to be in USA Today from 2 years ago, possibilities of witness tampering. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak.